Hello, U.S. history students. Welcome to this review. In this first review, we're going to go through the documents here. Hopefully, I can give you some new insights, some things that I didn't talk about in class, maybe. And then for the second review, I'd like to go through the yellow sheets. So let's get started here. And basically, for these documents, you choose one from each grouping. So for letter A, Civil War and Reconstruction, you have one choice between this picture here and then this document here from Lincoln. So then for each one, you do two things. One, you describe what is being said in the document, what is going on in the document. And then you put it in a larger context. What does this say about, well, in this case, the Reconstruction or the larger history, things that happened before, things that happened afterwards. And then, of course, you're being required to use at least two relevant outside terms. Well, let's get started here. This first document there is by Thomas Nast. We talked about him as being a very, very famous Gilded Age, in this case, Reconstruction era cartoonist. He's the guy that came up with the donkey and the elephant to represent the Democratic and Republican Party. Well, here we have a comment on Reconstruction. This image published September 5th, looks like 68 there, entitled "This is a White Man's Government." We have three white individuals clasping hands, their feet on the back of a black man who was a soldier. We know this from his hat here. And he's got the American flag down here, and he's reaching out towards something here. Well, who are these people? Well, I'm going to give you a few more hints. They're representing different groups of people. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at it, a little better look here. This person here is from New York, and we know this because he has 5 points. And 5 Points was a neighborhood in New York. If you've seen the film Gangs of New York, that neighborhood is kind of the star of the film, and it's a very gruesome film. Notice what his club says, a vote. That's very interesting, a vote. He's got his foot on this black man. So he's a northerner, he's a New Yorker, and I'm going to leave out what nationality he is. That's an important part of it. And also in the background, right over his shoulder, there's the ghostly image here of somebody. Well, it's a lamppost. Somebody's being lynched here. There's a building on fire. I'll give you a hint. New York, 1863. That's my hint there for some of this stuff here. Well, then in the center here, we got this figure. And look at his belt buckle, CSA, Confederate States of America. In his hand, he's got a knife there, the Lost Cause. Well, what could this be? What could this be? He's got a whip in his back pocket. And then we have another figure here. Looks like to be a wealthy person here. He's got a nice watch chain there, and he's got a billfold full of cash, and it says Capital. They're all joining hands to keep this man down. Well, what's going on? In very tiny print down here, it says this: we regard the Reconstruction Acts, so-called, of Congress as usurpations, look it up in the dictionary, and unconstitutional, revolutionary, and void. And note it says Democratic platform here. All right, well, I gave you some more clues there. This document by Lincoln, his second inaugural, remember the second one was that very short one, or shorter than the first. And he talks a lot about God. Well, what is he saying about God? What is Lincoln's understanding of what God's role was in the Civil War? How does this kind of color how Lincoln thinks about the Civil War? Look at the larger document. Don't just stop here, but look at the larger second inaugural. What's going on there? How does it compare to the first? Remember, we did that assignment. All right, well, here we have the Gilded Age, Booker T. Washington. and W.E.B. Du Bois. They're having an argument. What's the best case scenario? What's the best way for Black Americans to deal with the post-Reconstruction situation? Washington says one thing, Du Bois says another. And right here in this Du Bois section here, when he says Mr. Washington, he's referring to Booker T. Washington, not the president. Remember that. And also remember, these are both black men with completely different views, really, about how to address the same problem of racism, lack of education, so on. All right, well, here's an image that shows this monster representing Standard Oil, and the monster is threatening and grabbing all these things that maybe it shouldn't, like state capitol buildings. Here's the U.S. Capitol. Here's the White House. Here's some individuals being all rolled up. Well, this kind of gets at the power that Standard Oil had. It also gets at whether they're robber barons or captains of industry. And look at that. The one here, who are these two individuals? The blue and the gray. Who's this figure here? Look at the chains are broken. And remember, look at the hat here. It says Cuba. This is Spanish-American War, 1898. What's an irony about the message that's being sent here in this tableau, this image, and what happens as a result of the war? Offer may vary. The key point here is obviously this is the Statue of Liberty, beckons people into New York Harbor, immigrants, and then this offer may vary. How has the offer varied? How have immigration rules changed over time? The quarantine speech, know the isolation to involvement timeline. This is part of the timeline. He talks about needing to quarantine the patient or quarantine the aggressor. War is a contagion, another reference to disease. How does this reflect Americans' attitudes about entering the war? What have been some other historical examples of America wanting to stay out of wars? And then what happened after we got involved? I said this in class is one of my favorite U.S. history images because of the tension in this image. Tension between prosperity and lack of prosperity. A white world and a black world. Notice that these are all African Americans standing in line. These are all white people in the car here. Well, there's a lot of tension there. What was going on there? What was the causes of the crash? How was the Depression experienced by white people and black people? Your textbook mentions, look it up. All right, moving on. A. Philip Randolph. The big thing here is that he's proposing a march that doesn't happen. And FDR makes a deal with him. Your textbook talks about that deal. What was it? We talked about it. And then what famous company did A. Philip Randolph work for? And which march happens, not in 1942, but a little bit later on, and who's at the head of that march? All right, the key thing here is guts. This idea of what is America's role in response to the war? And then this little word here is very, very important. Appeasement. What was appeasement? All right, moving down here, the duck and cover drills. What are the kids doing? What was the conditions after World War II that led to this new war? What was the results or the outcome of this new war, this Cold War? What were some of the famous incidents in this Cold War? And then finally, here's poor Elizabeth Eckford, Little Rock, September 5th, 1957. What was happening on this day? What happened in 1954? And what happened in 1896 that all fit into this? Well, that's all the time I have for this tutorial. So good luck. Get to work.